Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is one of America's most beloved singers who's been entertaining us for the past 6 decades, starting as a 15-year-old member of the doo-wop group The Five Gents, then as a teenage heartthrob solo artist with his hits Halfway to Paradise,
I want to be your lover, but your friend is all I stay. I'm only halfway to paradise, so near yet so far away.
and Bless You.
Oh, darling, bless you, bless every breath that you take, yeah, bless every move that you make so perfectly, and bless your little heart for loving me.
And then, after spending several years as a successful producer, record company, and music publishing executive, he quite accidentally returned to singing and unexpectedly went to #1 on the charts, which led him to create the phenomenally successful group Tony Orlando and Dawn. They released 20 top 40 singles, including Candida,
Oh, Candida, we could make it together. The further from here, girl, the better. Where the air is fresh and clean.
Knock 3 Times,
Oh, my darling, knock 3 times on the ceiling if you want me. Twice on the pipe if the answer is no. Oh, my sweetness means you'll meet me in the hallway. Oh, twice on the pipe means you ain't gonna show.
Vaya Con Dios,
Now the hacienda's dark, the town is sleeping. Now the time has come to part, a time for weeping. Oh, vaya con Dios, my darling. Oh, vaya con Dios, my love.
Say Has Anybody Seen My Sweet Gypsy Rose,
Whoa, say, has anybody seen my sweet gypsy rose? Here's a picture when she was my sweet Mary Jo. Now she's got rings on her fingers and bells on her toes. Say, has anybody seen my sweet gypsy rose?
He Don't Love You Like I Love You,
He don't love you, and he never will, like I love you. And if he did, he wouldn't break your heart. He don't love you, girl, like I love you. He's trying to tear us apart.
Cupid,
Cupid, draw back your bow and let your arrow go straight to my lover's heart for me. Nobody but me. Cupid, please hear my cry and let your arrow fly straight to my lover's heart for me.
Midnight Love Affair,
Love affair. How can I make you stay? Midnight love affair. Please don't run away.
and everybody's favorite, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree.
Whoa, tie a yellow ribbon around the old about us, put the blame on me if I don't see a yellow ribbon around the old tree.
That song spent over a month in the #1 spot on the pop music charts and is one of the most recorded songs in history, with over 1,000 cover versions. The song won a Grammy Award in 1974 and was named Song of the Year at the American Music Awards. In fact, in 2018, Billboard Magazine ranked Tie a Yellow Ribbon at number 46 on its list of top 100 songs of all time. Our guest, along with his wonderfully talented singing partners Thelma Hopkins and Joyce Vincent Wilson, hosted their own TV primetime variety show, The Tony Orlando and Dawn Show, which ran for 4 seasons. Since 1977, our guest resumed his solo career, starring in TV movies including 300 Miles for Stephanie and The Rosemary Clooney Story, in which he portrayed Rosemary Clooney's husband, Jose Ferrer. He also did a highly successful Tony Orlando and Dawn reunion tour. He starred on Broadway twice in Barnum and Smokey Joe's Cafe, and he continues to headline in Las Vegas, Branson, Missouri, and touring all over the country. In 2002, he wrote a highly compelling, brutally honest, and deeply poignant, intimate memoir entitled Halfway to Paradise, which is truly one of the most memorable celebrity memoirs I've ever read. He has won the Casino Entertainer of the Year Award, the Best Las Vegas All-Around Entertainer Award 4 times, and prior to that, 3 times in Atlantic City. He's won the Jukebox Artist of the Year Award, the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and he received the Bob Hope Award for Excellence in Entertainment from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, acknowledging his efforts on behalf of United States veterans. And in 1990, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I'm overjoyed to welcome the incomparable Tony Orlando to our show. Tony, thank you so much for being here.
First of all, thank you for having me, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to record that and carry it on my phone and say, I want you to see what Harvey had to say about me. I'm going to say, you're not going to believe this, but I don't believe. Let me tell you something, Harvey. Nobody has ever done an introduction to me that has me saying to myself, hey, man, you did good. Wow. Holy mackerel. You did that. You did this. But you know what that tells me? You do your homework and you have a heart of gold.
Oh, Tony, you ain't seen nothing yet. Let me tell you, I've been looking forward to this for so long. I'm going to start by saying that when you were a kid, you wanted to sing like Frankie Lyman, who eventually became your friend. Who were some of your other musical influences growing up?
Without a doubt, Sam Cooke. Of course, Frankie was a big influence on me because I was about the same age. I was in my teens when I started singing with the Five Gents, as he was with the teenagers. But I would say Bobby Darin, Sam Cooke, Sammy Davis as entertainers, Jackie Gleason as an actor, comedian, performer. I was influenced by so many different people, Jerry Lewis for sure, and I had the opportunity of serving right by his side for 33 years, hosting the New York Television MDA Telethon with him and Sammy and Ed McMahon. So all of my heroes, Harvey, not only did I ever think I would ever meet them, but I work with them. To think that I worked with Sinatra and my first TV guest was Jackie Gleason. Can you imagine that?
Oh, we're going to get into that. You know, your grandfather, your beloved Papito, gave you a very important piece of advice. He said, Tony, don't be just one of the crowd. How did those words guide you in your life?
You know, it had the most impact of anything that's ever been said to me. As a matter of fact, I'm amazed that you saw that in the book. You're the first person to ever bring that up, Harvey. Thank you. My grandfather was an extraordinary man. I'll give you a little background on why that had such impact on me. Now, remember, when he said it to me, I may have been, I'm thinking 8, 9 years old. And I'm living in Hell's Kitchen in New York. And he's about to leave and turned to me and said those words to me. You know, stand out. Don't just be amongst the crowd. Make something, make your name mean something, your life means something. And he just simply walked out the door. Now, I idolized this man. Why? One, he was a high school teacher of English in Puerto Rico as a teacher. served in World War I as a paratrooper in Panama. He became the trumpet player, the lead trumpet player in the Desi Arnaz Orchestra. He opened the Coconut Grove in New York City as the main attraction there. He then ended up becoming the head of local 802 for musicians of Latin background. So my grandfather was this eclectic monster of an idol of mine at 8. So he made this turn, Harvey. He made like he was about to leave, and he just turned and he said, I remember exactly where I was sitting on this, those open Castro couches you can get in bed. It was one of those in the living room. That was where I slept. And I'm sitting cross-legged, and he goes, of course, my name then was Mickey, because my name is Michael Anthony Orlando Casavitas. Tony Orlando is my middle name. He turned to me and he said, Mickey, ahora, now, listen to Papito. Just don't find yourself in the midst of a crowd in your lifetime. Stand out, make your name worthwhile. Make people remember you, okay? Have a good day. And he turns and he walked out the door. And I carried that because I didn't want to disappoint this giant idol of mine. So every time I would start something, I'd remember, make something of yourself, get out there and do it. Remember, I only had an 8th grade education, and look at all that stuff that you just said I did. What a blessing.
Oh, that's for sure. You know, a lot of people may not realize when you were only 16 years old, you were hired by legendary music publisher Don Kirshner for $50 a week at the famous Tin Pan Alley to write songs and sing demos for people like Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil. In fact, those two couples wrote your first 2 hit songs, right?
Right. And it was their first 2 hit songs. And they're both in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they've won Academy Awards for their work. And of course, Carol's Broadway hit is about the 4 of them. The Broadway hit show, beautiful. Yeah, I was blessed to be surrounded with some incredible genius.
Well, another thing that many people may not realize, Tony, is that you worked with legendary record producer Clive Davis for 4 years as a music company executive. I want to ask you, what's the most important thing you learned from Clive Davis?
Oh, I can't even begin to list them. First of all, the first thing I learned from him, I was sitting in a singles meeting at Columbia Records. So every week we would go over the new singles that were about to come out. And he sends a little note across to me. And vice presidents are there, the heads of the music departments are there. And he sends a little note and said, please stay after the meeting. I stayed after the meeting, and he said, Tony, I want you to remember something. I want you to wear your suit and tie. I want you to come in looking like an executive. I want you to keep your weight down, because I had a big weight problem then and now. Keep your weight down, because when you walk into that room, when you care enough about yourself, it means you care about this company. So remember, however you lead yourself, you represent Columbia Records, you represent this organization. And I remembered that then I watched him. He would come in perfect. Harvey, his tie was perfect like yours. His shirt was perfect like yours. He sat with such a demeanor of leadership. He gave everybody an ear. And then the last thing he said was, you see these messages I have? I answer every single one. Now remember, I had just come out of my teens, and here I am working, and he makes me general manager of CBS Music. The belief that he had in me was extraordinary.
And you didn't let him down. And another fascinating thing about you, Tony, is that you were the one who gave Tommy Mottola the idea to stop performing and become a music label executive. But isn't it interesting? It's kind of amazing that you did the opposite. You left the publishing world when you were about to become vice president of a company, and you went back to performing. Isn't that so ironic?
I never thought of it that way, Harvey, but you're right. Tell you how that progressed. So Tommy comes into my office while I'm working for Clive. He says to me, Tony, help me out, man. I need a hit record. He was a singer. He looked very much like a teen idol, handsome, a lot of hair like Frankie Avalon. He had all the looks. And I said, listen to me, Tommy. Our day is over. We have to figure on how we're going to compete with those British acts that are now, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, we look like Fabian and Frankie Avalon. We're not going to get radio play. Here's what I suggest. You go find a job. I picked up the phone and I called Erwin Schuster. I said, Erwin Schuster, I have a great guy. You see how well I'm doing for Clive? This kid could do the same job for you. Well, he goes and gets the job. And then he goes and becomes president of Columbia Records. I mean, that was insane. Now, how did I go the opposite way? Here, I'm sitting in the office and a buddy of mine from the Tokens, remember the group, the Tokens, The Lion Sleeps Tonight? He says, Tony, I'm broke. You got to do me a favor. You got to sell this record for me. I need $3,000. So the record that he gave me to play and sell was called Candida. Lo and behold, I didn't think it would be something I would be recording because I'm now general manager, about to be vice president of CBS. I take it to a record company and the guy says to me, I love the record. I love the arrangement. I love the sound of the record, but Tony, I don't like the lead singer. I go back to Hank. I said, Hank, you got your $3,000, change the singer. He goes, you do it. I said, I can't do that. That's a different record company. I can't do that.
And not under your name.
And under my name, I said, okay, you need the money that badly, like you just said, Harvey. I said, tell you what I'll do. I'll record this song in an hour. If it comes off in an hour, it's yours. And if it comes off, do not call it Tony Orlando. I don't want to lose my job. Lo and behold, Harvey, the record comes out and it goes to #1 and sells 2 million records. I don't want to lose my job. I don't say a word to anybody, including my wife. Now the record's #1. I hear Bruce Morrow on WABC going, and here's our #1 record, Candida by Dawn. I said, Dawn? I called Hank up. I said, Dawn, why did you call it Dawn? He said, well, the president's daughter's name is Dawn of that record company. I wanted to make a good influence. Maybe he'd get more play. Well, as you know, he did. It went to #1, 2 million records. I say nothing. The record's done with. He comes back to my office. I have a song called Knock 3 Times, Tony. Please do me the favor. We got a follow-up hit. Come, I said, listen, Hank, I can't do this. No, please. It's for your old buddy, Hank. Please don't let me down. I promise after this, I won't ask you. So, okay. I go in, I cut Knock 3 Times. When I finished the record, Harvey, I said, this record's not going to make it. He said, why is that, Tony? I said, because you say twice on the pipe. The Midwest don't have pipes. This is only going to be a hit in Brooklyn. That's it. So go have fun. Well, the record sells 4 million records. Now we got 6 million records. And unlike Tommy Mottola, I said to myself, maybe my dream can come true after all. And I go to Clive, and this part you're going to love, Harvey. I go to Clive Davis and I say, Clive, I'm sorry. I appreciate everything you've done for me. I have to leave the company. He said, why? Because you're Dawn? Said,
He knew.
You know that I'm Dawn? He goes, Tony, it's the worst kept secret in all of radio. Of course, we all know it was you. You had that sound. We knew. I said, you didn't say anything? He said, no, I figured once you'd come to me, you'd allow me to have at least 6 of our songs in the Dawn album. He says, I'll tell you what you do, Tony. You go and chase your dream. And if it doesn't come true for you, you can always come home. And I never forgot that from that man.
Wow. What a person and what integrity. And another thing about you that I really admire, when you first started working with Thelma and Joyce, you hired Mark Gordon, who worked with the Fifth Dimension, to help them create that tight, polished sound. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, how much credit does Mark Gordon get for that highly professional signature sound of Tony Orlando and Dawn?
Well, he gets a lot of credit. He had a guy named Rene DeKnight, who used to be the teacher, the guy that the Fifth Dimension used to learn their harmonies, because he also managed the Fifth Dimension. So he was a great part of that. And the thing is that I got lucky with Thelma and Joyce, because Thelma and Joyce at the time were the number one background singers in all of Detroit. They did Heard It Through the Grapevine with Marvin Gaye. They did Shaft with Isaac Hayes. In fact, it was Thelma who said, when Isaac said, John Shaft, he's a bad mother. She's the one that said, shut your mouth. That was Thelma Hopkins. So I had these 2 wonderful, incredibly talented singers who have already had hit records as long as my arm, about to go on the road with me as Tony Orlando and Dawn. So I was blessed. In fact, Harvey, this entire book, this entire life, this interview has divine intervention all over it.
Well, that's how I feel too. I got to tell you, you wrote in your book that although you've always loved performing on stage, rehearsals scared you to death. Why?
I react to audiences. I go out, and when I feel the energy in the room, that's when I light up. But when you go into a room of 2 and 3 people who are sitting there and judging you, and all you have in front of you is the producer of the TV show and you go in and you're basically a rehearsal for them, especially on television, is an audition every week. I hate auditions because auditions make me nervous. I don't fly like I do when it's my turn to go on stage. So I hated rehearsals. As a matter of fact, I remember Art Carney being on the variety show. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Vaya Con Dios. And he comes in, now this is the great Art Carney, and he said, Tony, I can't do the rehearsal in front of the heads of the network. I looked at him, I said, you can't? He goes, no, I get too nervous in front of 2 and 3 people. I'm not myself. I said, thank God there's somebody else like me. He was very much the same. Here is a guy who was nominated for Academy Award, and he was nervous to do a sketch on the Tony Orlando and Dawn show and show his acting ability to 3 people. I don't know what it is. It's just part of being an entertainer, I guess. I don't know.
I think it is. Now, of course, I have to ask you about your signature song, Tie a Yellow Ribbon. Because your musical tastes were always more R&B than pop, you almost turned down that song. And I read that you tried to give it to Bobby Vinton to record. Is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely true. Well, Bobby Vinton was a great friend of mine. In fact, he was my sax player when I first started in 1961, before he had hits. And all of his hits, if you realize, is Roses Are Red, right? Blue on Blue, Blue Velvet, all colors. So when I didn't want to record it, I called Bobby and I said, Bob, I got the greatest song for you. You don't have yellow in your repertoire. And I played him. He was in London at the time. I played him Yellow Ribbon. He says to me, that's the corniest song I've ever heard in my life. And he turned it down. The reason he said that was because when I was on the road with him, way back when he had Roses Are Red, and he played the record for me to give my opinion, my words to him was, that's the corniest song I ever heard. So he was paying me back. But little did he know, or I know, that the payback was a gift back to me, because that became the signature song we all pray for. It became my Mac the Knife, my New York, New York. It became my Up, Up and Away. It became the song that became part of what defined me as an artist.
Well, Bob Hope always said that he was the one who made Tie a Yellow Ribbon an instant classic because you sang it on one of his TV specials honoring the Vietnam vets. Do you agree?
I do. And it wasn't a TV special, but what it was when the Vietnam POWs came home, Harvey, Bob had a show at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, 70,000 people there to welcome them home. Now, remember, their eyes hadn't even adjusted to daylight yet from the Hanoi Hilton. Terribly tortured veterans coming home to America. And he had this show, as typical of Bob Hope, long list of stars. And he called me. I had never met him. And he said, this is Tony Orlando? I said, yes. He said, this is Bob Yellow Ribbon Hope. He said, I heard your song on the radio, that opening line, I'm coming home, I've done my time, is exactly what's happening with our POWs. Would you mind opening my show? So when I went there, here I was for the first time performing that song for 70,000 people at the Cotton Bowl. Bob Hope, the man, introducing me to 500 of the bravest men I will have ever met in my life. They changed my life. So in essence, Bob not only changed my life by presenting the song for the first time live, but he also changed my life by bringing me to my veterans. Because ever since that day, I've dedicated my career to raising money for veterans, like I did that day for the POWs. And you know what? This being the 50th anniversary, Harvey, of Yellow Ribbon, it's also the 50th anniversary of our POWs from Nam. Guess where they have me coming? The Nam have asked me, the POWs did, to come to the Nixon Library and host their 50th anniversary of their homecoming. I can't believe it, that we are still friends. I reunion with those guys for 50 straight years, all because of, you're right, Bob Hope.
Well, it's just an amazing synergy. It's an amazing synchronicity. I want to ask you, Tony, about racism. You're half Greek and half Puerto Rican. You were performing with two Black girls. It was the 70s. You landed a primetime TV show. Did you and the girls experience racism within the industry or from the public?
Oddly enough, I'll share a story with you. When you're on network television then, there was only 3 networks. There was no cable. So if you get a letter, this is what they used to tell me. If you get one letter, it represents 5,000 people. Somehow they figured that out in the polling, right? So we never really got hit by any bad words. And we were surprised because, of course, it was during the time of All in the Family. It was post Martin Luther King passing, Bobby Kennedy. I mean, it was a tough time racially and socially for America. So we knew that being the first multiracial group to ever have a primetime television show, that we might be in for it. We knew. Nothing happened until one day, Fred Silverman came to me, who was the president of CBS, said, Tony, we've gotten a few letters about a black and white issue. How do you want to handle it? I said, well, that's not a lot of letters, five or six letters. It was 1,000 letters per person. We take it seriously. I said, okay. I don't want to do anything. I just want to go out and sing Abraham, Martin, and John. And we went on stage. The cameras came in. I started it. Thelma went to her verse. Joyce went to her verse. And you know, after we did that song, we never, ever again got one letter.
I remember that moment. I have to tell you, I was a huge watcher of your show. And I remember that moment. I didn't know, of course, about the letter. And the interesting thing I think about you and Dawn and your music is the disconnect between the fans and the music critics. Now, throughout your career, you've seen how wrong those music critics have been. They were wrong about Elvis.
I love you, Harvey. I love you.
They were wrong about Elvis. They were wrong about the Beatles, the boy bands, the rap artists. In fact, really anyone who's ever come along who did something original or who was highly popular with the public. What's your take on music critics?
Well, I always said when I read a bad review on us back in those days, you know, bubble gummy and this and that and all this stuff, I said, don't worry about it, Tony, because that newspaper is going to end up under someone's poodle tomorrow anyway.
That's exactly right.
I never took it. It never took me down. As a matter of fact, you want to know something, Harvey? I learned more from the criticisms of critics than I did from a positive review. They actually didn't realize that they were doing me a favor. They thought they were knocking me down, and I learned something from each negative point, because very many of them were not wrong. Very many of them, when they would say things like, Tony's too corny, talks too much, I would modify it so that I would talk the same amount, but watch how corny I got. Because I'm a corny guy. You know, I'm about basically just loving people. And they found that annoying, I guess, that I loved them. And they didn't think it was real. They didn't think that I could possibly love them. And let me share with you, I've never shared with anybody, okay? I love them because my sister Rhonda, who was the pistons to my engine, I took care of her as a young kid. She's 10 years younger than me. She was cerebral palsy, and she had some really serious issues with her ability to think. She had an IQ of a child of 8 months old until she died at she was 21. She taught me the importance of being able to scratch your own itch. I remember when my sister would cry, and you know, if you have a child, you know the hunger cry versus the tired cry. Well, I knew the itch cry when Rhonda did, because it frightened me, because the itch was so uncomfortable for her, she would go into seizure. So I would find that itch. I would search every part of my sister's body until I found it. When I scratched it and she went, oh, I realized how important it was for people to clap their hands in the audience because they can. I realized the importance of them to be able to scratch their own itch, to hear themselves sing as they sing along with me on Tie Yellow Ribbon. It's all because of that moment and that lesson from my sister, who couldn't think beyond an 8-month-old child, that I took that to those reviewers. And what they didn't realize was I really did love the audience. And they were wrong. They read me wrong. My corniness was really me. It wasn't a stupid me being corny. It was me being corny. So I was more real than the guy they think was real, who was being really hip and in together in their time and sarcastic and annoying to people and curses on stage. That wasn't me. What they saw up there was the real deal. And then I look back on it, and guess what, Harvey? Guess what? I've had many of those reviewers come to me and say, Tony, I was wrong. Tony, you meant it. Tony, thank you for allowing me to clap my hands and scratch my own itch.
Well, I hope you know that the audience certainly detected loud and clear your authenticity, your
Always.
sincerity, your warmth. That's what sold you. That's what sold your music. It's what sold your TV show. Now, you wrote in your book that one of the people in show business who really impacted you very significantly was Minnie Pearl. Why?
Oh my God, Minnie Pearl came on the stage. She had that, that character. Hello, hi there. Here I am. It's me. Minnie,
howdy.
Yeah, howdy. That's it. Howdy. And then she'd come out of her dressing room, and she'd look like the governor of Tennessee. I looked at her. I said, Minnie, look at you, elegant. Look at you. Nothing close to that lady I just saw out there on that stage. She said, Tony, I know the difference between the character that I created and the character that I am. And always remember that whatever character you create on the screen or on the stage, don't ever lose the real person inside you. Guess what? If I looked like the governor, I would still enter the room and say, howdy. So she was a real person with that outfit on or with the elegant governor's outfit on. And she taught me to just continue to believe in being yourself. She was an amazing woman. This was an articulate, intelligent, creative woman. And you'd never think it when she played that character. But when you analyze the character and you hear what she was trying to say was, howdy, I love you all. I'm here. It's me, Minnie. And the real her really was her all the time. So whenever I did a movie or a sketch on television or whatever I did on stage, I always remembered Minnie Pearl.
That's beautiful, Tony. Now, of course, you had all the biggest stars on your TV show, but can I tell you who my favorite guest was on your show?
I can't believe this. You're amazing.
It was your beloved grandmother, your mamita. That was the best guest you ever had on the show, and I don't think anyone will ever forget it. Mind you, that being said, are you aware that you're responsible for one of the funniest moments in the history of television? And it happened on your show. Can you think of the incident I'm referring to?
There's only two I can think of.
Well, I'll give you a hint. It involved Phyllis Diller.
Phyllis Diller.
That is one of the most hilarious incidents that ever happened on television. And if anybody out there hasn't seen it, you've got to get the DVD box set of the Tony Orlando and Dawn show, because that little incident, which I will not describe, I don't want to ruin it for the audience, that is worth 10 times the price of those DVDs, I'm telling you.
Well, there was two moments. That one was definitely top of the list. You're right. And she was so gracious, as you could see on the video, because I could have embarrassed her to the point where I'm going to let you go with not telling the audience, but it was embarrassing for her, and she saved me with her attitude about it.
What class?
And she insisted to leave that moment in the show. By the way, she was like, "Don't take it out. I'll never get a bigger laugh." Isn't that wonderful?
Well, everybody the next day was talking about, do you think this was planned? Do you think that this was part of the script? And I always said, there's no way that was planned, because even Tony can't act that well. That was not acting. That was
Right.
Tony. And what was so moving about it was that our hearts all went out to you. We felt for you because we could see how embarrassed you were. It was just an amazing moment on television. And
I want to tell you something. Okay? I've never met you before. You've known so much about me, and I've not known so much about you. But from this moment on, you are my brother. We're going to become the deepest of friends. We're going to become family, because I feel your heart. I feel your support. I feel the confidence building. I feel the anger you had at those critics that put me down. I feel the love that you've had for me back in those days. And let me tell you something. I do not take it for granted, and I forever will thank you. And you're in trouble now, because Tony now is going to be a friend that you're going to say, "Is that him again? Is he on the phone?"
I have felt like I was your friend forever. And one of the reasons I wanted to have an interview show after I left my position as a criminal court judge was to meet you, believe it or not. Wow. Now, Tony, you wrote quite candidly in your book about your struggle with the nightmare of drug addiction and how you finally got clean. What do you have to say to anyone out there watching this interview who might be suffering with a substance abuse addiction?
It's a tough one to answer, Judge. You've been a judge. You've seen things in your lifetime that are difficult to try to explain to the next person.
But I never went through it.
Here's all I could say about that is how I reacted and why I stopped. I didn't want to embarrass my mother anymore. I didn't want to embarrass my grandmother, who was on my show, who was amazing to me and raised me with my mom, my grandmother, Mamita. I knew that I had to put the brakes on, because if I continued, I would be putting my mother and my grandmother and the children of my fans, whose kids were watching that show, into a position that I didn't want to put them in. So I put the brakes on out of respect for my family. So if you go back, if you're in a drug situation, you don't realize all these things. But if you can listen to me and go back and say, I can't do this to this beloved mom of mine, or my beloved father, or my beloved grandmother, or whoever put the braking system in you to be able to say enough and stop. If I didn't have them to think about, and my basic belief in the Lord Jesus Christ, being brought up in a very Catholic home, if I didn't have the fear of the Lord, and I didn't want to disappoint him ultimately, I wouldn't have been able to stop.
Well, Tony, this is going to be a little hard for me to say to you, but I now want to tell you one of the reasons I wanted so much to have you on the show. And it's because shortly after you came out of the hospital in the summer of 1977, when you finally came to terms with your drug addiction, you made an appearance on the Mike Douglas show, and you talked about depression, drugs, the death of your very dear friend, Freddie Prinz. I'll never forget something you said that moved me enormously. You said, there are two ways to quit drugs, my way or Freddie's way. Please quit my way. Tony, I don't know if you realize how many people you helped on that day, but I'm one of them. And I want to thank you publicly for doing that.
My gosh. Well, I'm kind of speechless right now. I remember that show. I don't remember saying that, but if you say I said it, I'm sure I did.
You said it.
Yeah, and it's true. It's true. There's two ways to treat your drug addiction, and Freddie's way was unfortunately the way you don't. But I remember being on that show because I don't think I've ever told you this on the book or any other show. I don't think so. I was very close to the Ford family. Betty Ford, President Ford. In fact, I was there when they sat Mrs. Ford down and said, "You've got to stop your drinking and use your prescription drugs." She went out publicly as a first lady and told the world that she was addicted to prescription drugs. So she went to the Eisenhower Medical Center, and now it's called the Betty Ford Medical Center, and found her and became sober. When she heard of what happened to me, she called me up just before Mike called me, Mike Douglas. She said, "Tony, it's Betty. I want you to go public with what you've been through, because it's just what you just said, Harvey." She said, "You can help a lot of people out there if you just go on TV and be bare about it, be naked about it, tell the truth about it." So Mike Douglas, lo and behold, just happens to call me that day. And I said, "Mike, you're not going to believe this. I just got a call from Ben." He goes, "I'll tell you what, can I come to the house and do the whole 90 minutes with you?" So remember, at that time, Harvey, that was a big story. It was on the cover of People magazine. Freddie had died not too long before that. I suffered the loss of, I watched him die. I was the last pair of lips that had kissed his lips were mine. He was my young brother, and I never saw anybody die before. And here I saw Freddie die. And oh God. So when she said that to me, she said, "You have to get on." I listened to her, and lo and behold, all of these years later, I'm on your show. And what do you say? What do you say? You echoed her words. That's almost 50 years ago. Almost 50 years ago. And the first time I'm hearing it back to me is right now with you, Harvey.
But I want you to know, I want you to know, Tony, that I'm not the only one. There must have been millions of people you helped that day. And I don't really know whether you get the impact you've had. I mean, in your book, you wrote about going on Broadway to star in Smokey Joe's Cafe. That was in 1999. 1999. You've been a star since the 60s. And you wrote in your book that it was while doing that show that you finally accepted the fact that you were a good singer. Tony, what took so long?
Well, if you ever stood by some of those singers that was in that show, you'd know why, because they were amazing. Every one of that cast came out and belted out a song, and they paid attention. I always paid attention, Harvey, to the show. I was into entertainer. And so the singing voice was never important to me until I get into the studio. When I get into the studio to make a record, then my focus was on a vocal. But when I got on stage, my focus was on the show, the energy, the funny, the comedy, all of the aspects of being an entertainer. When I did Smokey Joe's Cafe, I was forced to think one way: sing. Because that's what you were surrounded by. Incredible singers. And they gave me 12 songs of that show to sing. I wasn't about to go out there and start thinking about being funny and being that guy up there and having a good time, creating energy. No, I concentrated on the vocal. And guess what happened to me? For the first time, I liked my own singing. For the first time, I heard myself and said, "You know what, Tony, you're not bad. That's not bad. You did I Who Have Nothing." Be proud of that performance on that vocally. So it was a learning curve for me from experiencing Broadway, which is a totally different experience than a nightclub or an arena. It's disciplined. It's about vocal, if it's a musical. It's about performing, but telling the story. It's not about your story. So that learning curve for me gave me such a boost of confidence even though I was in the business all those years before, it was really a real shot for me to think differently.
Well, welcome to the club. We all figured that out a long time ago. Okay, Tony, I want you to just sit back for a moment. Just listen to some of these highlights of your career. Just listen to this. One of your very first fan letters was from Elvis Presley. Before you were 20 years old, you were performing on tour with Gene Pitney, Jackie Wilson, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Dusty Springfield. You attended a party hosted by Sal Mineo with Annette Funicello, Frankie Avalon, Paul Anka, and Fabian. Burt Bacharach produced one of your early songs called To Wait for Love. You played the last show at the Copacabana in New York. On September the 5th, 1976, you stood backstage at the Jerry Lewis Telethon in Las Vegas when Frank Sinatra reunited Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin on live television after they had been estranged for over 20 years, and you were there. You got to spar with Muhammad Ali on national television on the Dinah Shore Show. You got to present Barbra Streisand with a Grammy Award in the movie A Star is Born. You got to do comedy sketches on your TV show with legends like Jackie Gleason, George Carlin, and Jerry Lewis. When you had the flu, Kate Smith nursed you back to health. Danny Thomas did a stand-up routine at your wedding. And Tony, I'm just scratching the surface. Do you have to pinch yourself sometimes to believe the life you've lived?
Thank you for that. I don't know what to say.
That's your life.
Yeah.
Have you thought about your legacy and how you want the world to remember you?
Just want to be known as a nice guy.
Well, I want to tell you how people here in Canada remember you. I don't know if you remember this, but you did something unheard of back in 1973. After a sold-out concert at a stadium in Vancouver, you spent 8 hours signing autographs. I know because I was there, and people are still talking about it, Tony. That's who you are.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do. In fact, I'll tell you something about that. By the way, you moved me to tears. I don't know quite why, because it's been a long haul.
Because I see your heart.
It's been an unbelievable journey, but all those things that you say I've accomplished or was part of is you just hit me like I just don't know what to say. Thank you for that.
Well, I promised you I'd give you an interview like no other.
No other, and I don't think there'll ever be one again. There's something, it takes a human being like you, seriously, Harvey, to see through the curtain and look behind the curtain the way you just did, and look at my life the way you have, and to share that with me and move me to my very soul, because all I've ever wanted to do is do a good job, and entertain people and make people happy. Well, guess what, Harvey? You did that for me. You made me happy. But these are happy tears and joyful tears, because, I've never had that kind of recognition before. And I really mean it. It is something a performer should hear. And thank you for that. I can't thank you enough for that. But to go back to the 8 hours in Vancouver, I remember Thelma. Now, Thelma on the show was exactly the way she was off camera. Okay. And she goes on to be the longest running sitcom actress in history right now. So she was sitting there doing the autographs, right? And now, that line, there was 20,000 people in that arena that night. And I think at least half of them were on that line. And she goes, you had to open your big mouth. We're in our third hour of signing this. My arm is about to fall off. She was just coming at me. And I said, Thelma, remember the story I told you, Harvey, that I learned from Clive Davis about remember, return all the messages. This was a message from that audience to me, that they liked what I did. I had to turn back and write back, thank you. I had to. No matter how long it took, I had to. For those people to stand online, you stood online for a good 5, 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever it was. And It was one of the most unbelievable appearances I did. We walked back, we sat there, we said, imagine those people stood on line. No one complained. No one said, I have to get home to watch this or watch that. And they're there for us. We never forgot that, Thelma and Joyce and myself. And very often, Harvey, if you were in that line, you should be the person that represents all of those people. I don't have a thank you for you. And I hope I said the right thing in your autograph.
Oh, you sure did. And I'll never forget it. And somehow I knew back then that this would happen. I can't tell you how. I want to tell our viewers that you can learn more about Tony Orlando, buy his albums, and see his concert schedule by going to his official website, tonyorlando.com. Well, Tony, can I ask you one last question?
Please.
If you could go back and talk to that little boy, Michael Casavitas, who dreamed of singing like Frankie Lyman and sipped chocolate egg creams at Mink's Diner, what would you say to him?
Job well done. And most of all, you continue to respect people, love people, and you've never lost that ability to care about people. I think that's what I'd say.
Well, Tony, I want to remind you of something. When you were just starting out, Groucho Marx gave you a piece of advice. He said, never lose the ability to say thank you. So that advice is resonating with me in a big way right now. Thank you so much, Tony Orlando, for giving me this interview. I know you're on tour. I know you're really busy. Thank you for taking the time to appear on our show. I will never forget it.
Well, let me compliment you with something, okay? I now have a radio show in New York City, WABC Radio. We're in our third year, and I interview a lot of people. And I've always been a good interviewee, but there's a great, it takes, to be able to be a good interviewer is another category into itself. I learned that to be a good interviewer, you have to be a good listener, which I never was. I talk too much. Let me compliment you on being that listening interviewer. You have the art form of being a great interviewer without losing the truth of the subject, the truth of the matter, the heart of the matter. You don't worry about what people think about you liking me, which a lot of interviewers do. You are in a class all by yourself. Let me tell you, it's an honor, a privilege to be on your show. And if you ever need me again to get the coffee or sweep the floors or get the mail, whatever it is that you need for that show, you remember, you call your brother Tony, because as of now, as of this day, you are that. You are my friend, you are my brother, and you know something? You've known me all my life. It's time I get to know you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tony. I love you so much. I can't thank you enough. And I can't wait to meet you in person. Next time I go to one of your shows, I'm going to ask if I can come backstage and meet you in person.
Not only can you come backstage, whatever you see on the website where I'm working, remember there's 2 tickets or 4 tickets for that show and an automatic backstage, your family.
Thank you, Tony. I love you so much.
Love you back.
Our guest has been the one and only Tony Orlando. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver, my wonderful managers,
Thank you, Steve.
My wonderful managers, Rick and Robin at the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.